Hi everyone. I thought today would be interesting to talk a little bit about the economy in New Zealand. New Zealand is considered a prosperous country. I mean, that being said, our dollar is never excessively strong. We're always below that of the euro, of the American dollar. However, it does compare well to other countries, like with Australia. New Zealand is often quite on par, which is very helpful because New Zealand often trades between New Zealand and Australia very often. And as of recent, New Zealand's been very strong and aligned with like the Canadian dollar, which has been a very positive thing to see. When I think of New Zealand's economy, it takes me back to 2010 when the recession hit. That was a very massive thing that affected the entire world. And one of the things that stood out to me when that happened was is that New Zealand was one of those countries that was the quickest to escape the recession, to bounce back. And as we learned about it, we talked about how New Zealand wasn't too negatively affected by the recession as countries like maybe the United States were very, very heavily affected by that 2010 recession. And maybe some of the reasons why New Zealand wasn't so affected is New Zealand isn't they don't buy into the idea of consumerism as much as places like maybe the United States. In New Zealand, we tend to buy products which are more local. So local businesses, we like to support them and make sure that if the money's going towards a family and a neighborhood, would rather spend the money on that rather than on a big multinational company. We prefer to buy from those local places, and that means that the money that we're spending stays in New Zealand. We're not paying for things being made in factories over in China so much or in India. Rather, we're paying for goods which are higher quality, which may be a little bit more expensive, but are of local businesses and people. And that means, yeah, as I said before, the money stays in New Zealand and stays in our communities, which is good. And also, I think we're quite rational in New Zealand. When we spend our money, we're not always spending on things. I don't think people generally buy a lot of fancy cars, things like that, or different watches and the newest cell phone, things like that. Of course, people will. I'm not saying that for everyone, but I think as a general, in New Zealand, I think people have a value on different things. People value more travel rather than material goods or other pleasures. Like people enjoy food in New Zealand. It's a big part of our culture. So people like to eat local cuisine, things like that, because I think it's just a preference of New Zealanders. We don't like to we don't like to be flashy. I think in New Zealand we like to we just like to have good quality rather than something that's kind of to show off, which I think is interesting. Um, yeah, so I think because of that, maybe New Zealand has been quite prosperous. We care about um, local businesses. I think is such a big deal because if a local business is failing or struggling, people generally will try and go to that business more to try and help that business survive and grow more. And people tend to trust New Zealand businesses more, um, which is like a really nice thing to see. You know, People would prefer to go to their local fish and chip shop because they know that the person who works there is a good person because they've grown up with them or whatever reason, rather than go to a place like McDonald's or Burger King because they know that their money is going towards a family and a person rather than just this big business from the United States. Um, Also, I think one of the other questions I thought about was what is it like for a young person entering into the workforce? I know one of the big issues I think in New Zealand, however, is some people like to treat jobs which I think are more geared towards university students or high school students. Some people will treat that as a full time career, as their lifelong job. I know when I finished high school, I was working um, in a I guess a support worker role. And one of the people that I was working with, he was in his 50s and he was married and he had a family. And he was very qualified overqualified for the position that we were doing. We were doing the exact same job. We were getting paid very similar. However, he was basically doing a job that was too easy for him. It was a job that he didn't have to, he didn't have to do anything extra. And it's sad because you also see that in supermarkets, there'll be a lot of people there who are quite a lot older, whereas in these jobs are meant to be, they're long hours, or they're these kind of jobs that maybe they don't have a lot of requirements to get these jobs. You don't need qualifications. But there are people who will stay in these roles for 20, 30 years. And then when high school and university students need to go, they need to work, they need to find ways to pay for university. They can't get these jobs in supermarkets and retail places because there are people there who are there full time. They don't want to leave. They're there for 20, 30 years. And I think this has been quite negative on New Zealand, I think personally, and it's something I don't like about it. That's all the time I have. I hope this was interesting, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Thank you.